Even before Bernie Sanders began surging in the polls, a battle was taking place behind the scenes for the soul of the Democratic Party. As they were preparing for the 2016 election, the party needed to figure out if they were going to be true progressives or if they're going to move further and further to the blue dog Democrat right. The voters are clear on what they want from Democrats, and I'm joined now by Richard Eskow, the host of the Zero Hour, to tell us about this. Richard, I read your stuff very early on years ago. You were talking about the fight for the heart of the Democratic Party. You understood then that we're going to be at this crossroads. You saw us go through the Clinton years where we started losing our identity with what we really were supposed to be. And then for years you've been talking about this topic, and right now it's so important. What is your take? Are we making any progress in trying to understand what the Democratic Party is, what they should be?
Yeah, I think we are. I think we're at a real crossroads now. As you said, I think we've reached the point where, with the candidacy of Bernie Sanders, with the rise of Elizabeth Warren, with a lot of grassroots races around the country, we're seeing people saying for the first time within the Democratic Party that this party needs to reestablish itself as the party of the middle class, as the party for eliminating poverty, as the party of working people. And I think there are people saying you can't just do that with rhetorical feints in the right direction. For 30 years, we've seen an entire branch of the Democratic Party that has tried to split the difference between Wall Street fundraising and Wall Street job opportunities and the rhetoric of populism and liberalism. And I think what we've seen is that.
Okay, you hit something really important there. I don't want to miss it. Okay, now, as you were talking about what it is that's splitting the Democratic Party, you mentioned the fundraising. Okay, we get that. We get that the Democrats are out there trying to raise money. But what people don't understand is a lot of people move through this political system with the idea of, gee whiz, I'm going to get a job on the other side of it. And so you'll have staff members move in through a particular administration. They'll work on a campaign. They'll have an administrative position, and then they move to Wall Street. That is kind of part of the way the Democratic avenue has become. It's really no different from the Republican avenue. And so I don't know how you overcome that, because the people that Democrats are attracting right out of school to do this sometimes have that is their intent. Their intent is, this is my start. And so they're going to do what Wall Street wants them to do. They're going to do what corporate America wants them to do. They're going to advise their candidate or whatever, because that's where they're ultimately heading. That's such an important part that we missed of this story.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I think what we've seen for a number of years now is a Democratic Party dominated by people who are willing to be just liberal enough to get elected while not being so liberal as to endanger job chances or what have you in a future post-political career. And I think what we're seeing now is that the wealth divide has become so great, the financial crisis of the middle class has become so great, the extent of poverty has become so great on issue after issue after issue, we're finding it's not so easy to split the difference anymore and still be a viable political candidate. That what you have to do in order to change this economy going forward is significantly increase taxes on corporations and on billionaires and millionaires. You have to rein in Wall Street. You have to break up the big banks. And I think when you have an agenda like that, you have to be willing to sacrifice the post-political riches that so many people have become accustomed to. And I think the fact that people have been pulling their punches and sticking with vague rhetorical things about we want to help the middle class without getting down to specifics, I think that's alienated a large majority of voters.
Richard, you know why it has, and I think you've written about this too. There's very few topics you haven't that you haven't hit on that I think you just precisely get. We heard that language from Obama. We heard that very imprecise language, gee whiz, we have to push back Wall Street, and then there was no pushback. We have to do something about income inequality, and then there really was nothing done. We have to do something about the environment, and then we find him opening as many drilling areas in the United States, all over the world, than any president that's sat there in 6 decades. So what they are looking for is that precise language, and we're hearing that language now. Obviously, we're hearing it from Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is
Right.
not making anything, there's nothing equivocal about what he's saying. And I compare it to where it's kind of these big thought characters. It's like, of all people, Joe Manchin, this should be a Republican. By any other term, Joe Manchin is a Republican. He happens to be a Democrat in West Virginia, but he's a Republican. But he talks about this broad notion of how important Social Security is. But then really, when he goes into any other issue dealing, whether it's breaking up the banks, whether it's the need for infrastructure, whether it's climate change, whether it is funding public schools, whether it's the runaway military, you can't get these types to comment at a peep about what they really believe. But Bernie Sanders is right now.
Well, of course, I think so, and I'm helping Bernie Sanders. But listen, I would love to see every Democratic candidate, including Hillary Clinton, get specific. You mentioned an issue like Social Security. Joe Manchin went on record saying he wants that program expanded. Now, Hillary Clinton said something this week to the effect that we should protect and enhance Social Security. Well, I think we're reaching the show-me age of American politics. So great. Tell me, by what percentage would you increase those benefits? Would you increase them for everyone because we have a retirement crisis in this country? And are you willing to pay for it by lifting the payroll tax cap, which is currently protecting millionaires and billionaires from paying into it at the same rate as middle-class Americans? So, yeah, I think people are going to say, that's great. Show me how you're going to do it, because we've had vague rhetoric before. We're not moved by that anymore. So we'd love to see your specific proposal, like the one that Sanders has endorsed, like the one that Senator Manchin has endorsed, like the one that Senator Warren has endorsed, and so on and so on and so on.
Well, okay. What I'm seeing out here is sometimes in the Beltway people miss things. I don't miss them out here, and the things that I don't miss is that there is a lot of anger. I mean, a lot of anger about, for example, the 13 Democrats who voted for fast track. They're the same people. They're exactly the same people who never do anything about climate change, never do anything about public funding of schools, never do anything about NSA spying, never do anything about military budgets. They are Democrats. And like it or not, that unfortunately has become an arm of this party, and it is a struggle this time. Now, my take on it, and I want to see your reaction to it. Bernie has come out and said he has got to win in the social media. He's got to win in the grassroots. He's got to do something that's so outstanding and create such a groundswell that it looks like an Arab Spring. I mean, it's got to look like that. And is that kind of change going to be enough to move Democrats to think like progressives again?
Well, let's hope so, because I think at this point, the big enemy among most people, I think, look, Mike, you look at the polls, most people believe the way Bernie and the so-called left wing of the Democrats believe. Most people want to expand Social Security, break up the big banks, tax billionaires and corporations, and so on. That agenda is the American agenda. But what I think the oligarchs are counting on is the despair of the public, the belief that it's never going to change, the cynical idea that a little tinkering at the top is the best you can expect, and meanwhile things are going to stay the same, and our kids aren't going to have as good a future as we might have expected once. And I think the answer to it is no. We got to get out in the streets. We got to support a candidate like Bernie Sanders. Those 13 Democrats who voted for fast track and therefore for another lousy trade deal, each of them should be primaried. Democrats should turn out in droves to turn them out of office. That's the kind of grassroots activism.
Richard, you talk about, and this is nauseating to me, but you're aware of it, I'm aware of it, is these progressive Democrats that say, gee, we have to maintain maximum unity. We simply have to take what we can because the Republicans are so bad. About 20 seconds, tell me your quick thought on that.
Well, I'll tell you, the Clintons always like to say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'd say it the other way around. Don't let the mediocre be the enemy of the better. Don't be convinced before the fight even begins that all we can get is more of the same. Be aware of your own power as a people, as a population, as a voter, as an activist, and get out there and do it. We can do a lot better if we mobilize. Let's do it.
Richard Eskow, one of the brilliant people in this business. You are the go-to guy for everybody with Ring of Fire, I can tell you that. Thank you for joining me, Richard.
Thanks,
okay?
man.